What's up, Nets fans? Welcome to another episode of the Brooklyn Buzz, presented by OTGBasketball.com. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Jack Manuell. How we doing, Jack?
Man, the Nets are always hot news, Nicholas. It's the off season, but luckily we're doing a podcast for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of worried going to like August that we'd run out of content and have to get creative, but it seems like there's quotes, news, rumors already floating around about the Nets for 2019, and we didn't even end 2018 yet. But to start this week off, we got a mailbag. Just a quick reminder, though, if you want to check us out, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, and YouTube. Feel free to subscribe, retweet, share. Let us know what you think at OTG Basketball on Twitter. But Jack, let's get this mailbag started. And honestly, really excited to do this. Really happy we actually had people to send us questions and kind of ask us stuff about the Nets. We really appreciate you taking the time to send in the questions.
Yes, sir.
To start us off, we got FC Chun 3114. Interact with him a lot on Twitter. His question is, at this point in time, who is the face of the franchise, D'Lo or Jarrett Allen, and who has more upside?
Yeah, I'm going to tackle this one, Nick. I did a lot of research for what I was telling you. I want to give our listeners and the people who took the time to contact us a heap of time myself. So two sides to this one for FChun 3114. The face of the franchise is ultimately D'Lo. His marketability is unparalleled. 2.4 million followers on Instagram, a plethora of fan pages, over 405,000 followers on Twitter. Allen has a respectable 10.4K on Twitter and 37,000 on Twitter, but Allen doesn't have that sort of cachet and marketability that D'Lo does. So that ultimately is the face of the franchise. Jarrett Allen could have a better season next year, and D'Lo can still do some nice things. But I still think D'Lo, in terms of being the face of the franchise, however you want to coin it, it's him. Jarrett Allen's new shirt, which I tweeted out, and the fact that I think that gives him a little bit. And the Bleacher Report article that we mentioned on the last piece that's come out quite recently as well is giving him a little bit of a boost as well. But in terms of face the franchise, it's D'Lo, and that could change, on next year's free agency. But in terms of upside, I'm actually going to go with Jarrett Allen here. Spencer Dinwiddie mentioned in that piece for Bleacher Report that he thinks Jarrett Allen could be the best center in the league. I think that he has that potential as well. That's like his ultimate upside. Obviously, the center position is so stacked now with guys like Rudy Gobert and Joel Embiid. But Jarrett Allen has a very unique skill set, and he's already exceeded expectations. D'Lo, I think his ceiling, while still quite big and top 5, top 10 point guard, I think it's slightly lower than for a guy like a Jarrett Allen. In that sense, I think both of these guys together can reach it. And I think in terms of marketability-wise, I think that they can feed off each other in ways. Like similar to what's sort of happening in Philly right now. You're Joel Embiid, the sort of loud, bombastic sort of guy on Twitter and social media and everything. Whereas Ben Simmons is a bit more low-key, got that sort of introverted personality a bit more, similar to Jarrett Allen. And I think that having a marketable duo, if both of them can pop next year, which we believe and we hope, then I think that that's going to work wonders for the franchise as well.
Yeah, no, you're pretty spot on, especially about the face of the franchise. I think you just look at D'Lo, not only from the marketability standpoint, but there's also was a ton of draft hype with D'Angelo Russell. When he was in college, he already has that fan base built up. It's kind of easy to sell. And if you ask a general NBA fan, who's on the Nets, who's their best player, they're going to say D'Angelo Russell. That's the guy that everybody knows. So, and Jarrett Allen, obviously he had a great season, but people didn't even really recognize him and give him many votes for the all-rookie teams. So in terms of overall upside, though, I think I would say this: Jarrett Allen has more positional upside where he could end up being, a top 5 center, top 3 center, where D'Angelo Russell has the upside that he's going to be more impactful on the court just because of the position he plays.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean? Like there's I don't want to compare him to James Harden, but there's a James Harden level that he can kind of possibly get to, maybe not MVP level, but the impact he'll have on the game will be so big, where I see Jarrett Allen as a guy who could be one of the best centers in the league, where I don't know if D'Angelo will ever be top 3 point guard in the league or number 1, where I could see that more likely for Jarrett Allen. When you kind of look at them, it's like Jarrett Allen's upside comes a lot from his physical tools, where you look at D'Angelo, it's just like pure basketball talent.
Yeah, and I think I actually had in my notes, in terms of ultimate upside Harden. I think D'Lo is like a weird amalgamation, and don't quote me on this, and you can at me on Twitter at the JManJVT if you don't agree. But I had Harden being the lefty, Steve Nash and Brandon Roy as my sort of weird amalgamation of players that I think that D'Lo has the potential to be or be sort of like. And obviously, all 3 of those players are amazing. Brandon Roy had a really great short period in his career, and Steve Nash and James Harden two of the best ball handlers that we've seen, in the past decade or so. So I think that they're positive things, and it's obviously going to be slightly hyperbolic coming from two Nets dudes, but if you want like more measured approach, go to Danny LaRue and Nate Duncan on a different podcast. We're going to give you what we think and what we believe, and obviously we're going to be a bit more positive on our dudes. But I think that D'Lo has all those tools, and we're seeing the baby steps happening right now.
And I'll say this about floors. I think Jared Allen definitely has a higher floor where I'm pretty safe saying that he's going to at least be a starter in the NBA, where there's question about D'Angelo if he's a starter or if he's more of a six-man type. Like, is he going to hit that level? Is he going to stay healthy? Where Jared Allen, I think there's a little bit more confidence about what he already is. Where D'Angelo, it's still unknown. There's a lot of untapped potential. But he does have us excited with all the workout videos.
Oh, yes.
On to our next question. This comes from someone on the OTG staff, Jorge Cantu, and you can find him on Twitter at CantuNBA. Under the assumption Spencer Dinwiddie comes off the bench for the first half of the season and he plays as well or better than he played last year, is there any chance that he may demand a trade to a team where he can get more minutes?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely a possibility that could happen, Nick. But it was rumored last season with the Cavs. But I think it's ultimately going to be how the market will dictate what it is. Are there going to be those same sort of suitors out there come the February trade deadline this time around? A lot of teams obviously going to be wanting to save that valuable cap space going into next year's free agency. Are they going to want to spend that on a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie? We still see teams without a point guard or a known point guard in Phoenix and Orlando, and Spencer Dinwiddie obviously fit in seamlessly there. I wonder if that's going to be the case come February or even before the season. I highly doubt before the season, but there certainly is a possibility from last year. Minutes-wise, he was actually third on our roster behind Carroll and Crabbe with 29 per contest. So I don't think that there's obviously a healthy D'Angelo Russell, Shabazz Napier, and Caris LeVert could change that somewhat. But I think Spencer Dinwiddie has a defined role going into this season. And I think minutes-wise, I don't think that's going to dictate, whether he wants to go or not. He seems to have a really good attitude. There was a quote from Sean Marks from his presser, and it was very positive and glowing of Spencer's attitude and his sort of work ethic and what he's put in for the franchise. And he retweeted that with an "oh shucks" and a nice little smiley face. So I think Spencer Dinwiddie right now is bought into what we're building and the culture and stuff. And I think Sean Marks is too. But obviously, a few months is a long time in the NBA landscape, so that could certainly happen. I think Spencer, right now, he has like the potential to be like the best sort of six-man, the best backup point guard in the league. The likes of Isaiah Thomas, Terry Rozier, Dennis Schroeder. I think he can be better than all of those guys. And I think that there's always going to be a market for those guys in the NBA. A guy like Darren Collison on the Pacers last year, who was awesome. A person who can start, but ultimately, can cede responsibility if needed. So I think for me, it's going to be about, what the Nets wants and in terms of their market needs, freeing up cap space. Do they want to sign Spencer Dinwiddie to a long-term contract who's going to be an unrestricted free agent in 2019? That's going to be a question as well. And are there going to be teams wanting to take him on and pay him further beyond next season when he is an unrestricted free agent? So there's plenty of questions, but in terms of answering your question, Jorge, it's certainly a possibility, but I don't think that it's very likely at this stage.
Yeah, I think there's a possibility, like you said, that he could possibly be traded. But I highly doubt that he would demand a trade. Like you mentioned, he bought into the Nets. Spencer definitely wants to be a starter, but he's shown a lot of belief and appreciation for the Nets, taking a chance on him, the performance team helping him take it to the next level, the coaching staff helping him take it to the next level. So I don't see him demanding a trade, but I do think there is a possibility. And I think he would have a discussion with the Nets like, hey, guys, like D'Angelo's having a really good season. Obviously, you're going to want to play him more. You have Shabazz. Could you possibly move me and get me in a place where maybe I can shine a little bit more and have a chance to make a really big contract this summer? So I think it's a possibility, but I don't see a situation where he'd be like, Sean Marks, trade me.
I wouldn't be overly surprised if it does get to that, because we've heard of Spencer's personality, and this is no slight on him whatsoever. He has the utmost confidence. He's known to be, the sort of most sort of fiery, outspoken character of the Brooklyn Nets locker room, and not in a negative sense. In just a guy that is very intelligent, very measured, and knows what he wants and knows what he can contribute, knows his worth and all those sort of things. So I think in that sense, it could get to a point, but I don't think that it's going to get to a point where it's a detriment. I think demand a trade, sounds really sort of negative in a sense, But he could just go, like you said, sort of go to Sean Marks. It's like, look, it's the best for both of us right now. And I think that the goodwill that has been brought up between both parties, I think that Sean Marks, you look at the Jeremy Lin situation, and as much as that was sort of, might be a bit disconcerting for other Nets fans and other point guards, it wasn't done in a way that sort of like was Masai Ujiri with the DeMar DeRozan situation. I think the way Sean Marks has handled himself and all the deals and all the moves has been one of the sort of things that's been a positive of him and why people are raving about him. And I think with Spencer Dinwiddie, I think there's already, an established relationship, like you were mentioning with the outside of just him and the coach and stuff, but the trainers and everyone else. So demand seems like really sort of strong and negative. It's like, oh, we'll stand back. But, he could ask for a trade. Let's change it to that. I think
he would be more like, I would see him asking for a trade. He does, even as like the attitude, and the personality you described. Like, I don't think he understands the business and understands like he couldn't really demand a trade and it wouldn't come off the right way. So I think asking for a trade would make a lot more sense.
Definitely, and I think he is one of the more intriguing free agents out of anyone in the 2019 free agent class. We've talked about, and we've got plenty of pieces on OTGbasketball.com about the sort of big name free agents, the top 25 free agents, the top 5 free agents going into 2019. But Spencer Dinwiddie, with what he's produced last season, third in most improved player. Next season, if he has another big year, like Jorge mentioned, he's going to get a payday, and he's going to deserve it. Like, whether it's a la Joe Harris, or whether it's more long term, whether there's more money available in next year's market, whether he takes like a 1 year big sort of deal like a KCP or Rajon Rondo. He's going to be fascinating to watch throughout the season, and we'll obviously keep on top of him at the buzz for sure.
Yeah, I think this name will be someone who's brought up a lot at the trade deadline, somebody who could possibly help a team on a small contract and a guy that you could maybe get long-term in the free agency if you have his bird rights. And that kind of leads to our next question, another Spencer question. And this is from Mikey Ryan. And you can follow Mike on Twitter at Mikey_Ryan11. Looks like the Nets may be a sleeper in the East for the final playoff spot. However, what would happen to Spencer Dinwiddie if the team falls out of the race? What type of assets would he net in a return? And I got to just shout this out. He mentioned the Nets might be a sleeper for a final playoff spot, and he's a Knicks fan. So that one definitely caught me off guard.
That balance, that measured approach from Knicks fans is very welcome on the Brooklyn Buzz, and very rare. I know you've mentioned that before, Nick, but a great question from Mikey. I think if he continues to form, he certainly warrants probably somewhere around a late first rounder, similar to what the Cavs offered in February last year. If he increases that form, then the package, surely it only gets better. But at the same time, I think a lot of teams are going to be wanting to hold on to their assets. But, conversely as well, the talk right now from guys like Dylan Jackson and other sort of draft reporters is that this class, this 2019 draft class is a little bit weaker than the 2018 and 17 class. So maybe guys are willing to sort of get rid of that. Spencer Dinwiddie still does have age on his side. He's by no means, in his late 20s or early 30s. He's got plenty of time left in his career. So I think that there's going to be value for him. I think a late first rounder for me, like I said, is probably what the Nets would be asking. They're not going to give him up for nothing. But I think at the same time, there could be, other packages available out there. But I think, Sean Marks loves those picks. He loves accumulating those assets as he's done over the past year and a half. But for me, that's probably what we would get in return, so to speak. But at the same time, it's going to have to be from like what the team itself is wanting. Like, if it's the Phoenix Suns or Orlando Magic team that'll look to be lower, they're not going to necessarily have those sort of assets available. So it's going to be different and difficult to sort of form a package. So it's a tricky one, but, I'm on the bandwagon of where it's like he's at least worth a late first rounder if what he did last season. If it increases his form, then surely it doesn't that package increase, Nick?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I think it really depends on his play. He's in an interesting situation because he is an expiring contract. I believe, I'm not a CBA expert, but the team would get his bird right, so they could sign him to a longer deal, even if they were in a bad cap situation. And he's on a small deal, so he's not very hard to trade for. You could even see it, a team trade for, one of their non-guaranteed guys, because I think in any trade, the Nets don't want a long-term contract unless it was an amazing player, which is highly unlikely to get for Spencer Dinwiddie. No offense to him or any disrespect. And like you said, I think the late first round is the most likely, but it depends on the draft class a little bit too, because like you said, it's a little bit weaker. It's like, do the Nets want a late first round pick, or is they better off just keeping Spencer Dinwiddie? I don't know if this is a route that they'll go, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities where they didn't keep D'Angelo Russell and they kept Spencer Dinwiddie, and then they signed somebody like a Kyrie Irving, and now they have Spencer as a backup or somebody who plays along the side as Kyrie. It works out a little bit better. So I think it's like Sean Marks is going to look at every deal that he's offered, but I don't think, like you said, he's going to take him for just a couple second-round picks or something like that. He's going to want value, fair value, and he's going to want to get what's best for the team. And in the situation they're in, because let's say the Nets are competing for a playoff spot or something, and they're having a really good season. Spencer hasn't played well a lot, or Shabazz is playing good minutes, or LeVert's really doing well as a backup point guard. They could trade him for another player that could help them compete for the playoffs in an area of need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have those, not only our own first rounder, but we have the Denver first rounder as well, which can be packaged to go higher as well. So, whether there's a trade package there available as well, there's, like we've talked about, the flexibility that Sean Marks has created is going to be an asset for the team. And, when he's wanting to make deals, he's going to have these sort of assets up his sleeve and go, well, look, we can do this. You want to do this? What about this? Can we add in this extra pick, this second rounder, a future second rounder? What about this future first rounder or something like that? And I think Spencer, probably alongside maybe a Damari Carroll, is going to be one of those guys that is going to be brought up pretty heavily towards the sort of February trade deadline.
Yeah, and like you said, he could be somebody using a bigger trade package as like a asset added in the package to help the Nets trade for a bigger player. There's been talk about trading for a star player. He's a pretty young guy with upside still there, and he could help you win now, and he also could develop to be better. So I think that's a real possibility. I think Spencer's going to, like you said, Jack, is going to be a name along with Damari that'll be brought up a lot this season.
Yep.
On to our next question. This is from your boy D-Money, Dylan Jackson. You can follow him on Twitter at Jackson with an X, NBA. And his question is, what's the expectations from Jana Musa and Rodions Kurucs in year one?
Of course, we get a draft question from Dylan.
No surprise.
No surprise. But it is a good question because for me, these are sort of changed, Nick. The pressure on these two rookies has lessened with a lot of the moves that we've made this offseason. You look at sort of last year and the year before with Jarrett Allen and Caris LeVert, their expectation and the opportunity for them was a lot greater. But now that the Nets have such a deep rotation, 12 or 13 deep, the Janan and Rodions probably aren't going to see, a whole heap of time. I was listening to a podcast, I think it was Jared Weiss mentioning the fact that Janan has a really unique skill set, and we've talked about it as well in our draft profiles and our draft episodes, that he gives a sort of, a completely different skill set when on the floor. His mentality, his offensive capabilities are something that none of these guys have on the roster. Even a guy like D'Angelo Russell, like his length, his speed, his craftiness, his shooting ability. I feel like he's going to be a burst sort of player. And then similar to what sort of Jarrett Allen was used as a burst player and then found himself, cracking the rotation quite regularly before getting a starting spot. I don't think that that's as likely for Janan because of, the sort of depth we have at sort of 1 to 3, his more favored positions. But I think that he's certainly going to have an impact. Rodions is more likely to probably play some G League time, but we do have him on a long-term contract, 4-year deal. There's no sort of pressure on him to sort of, produce now. I think Rodions will probably be yelling in Kenny and Sean's ear for the New York matchup. I think he's going to probably want to verse his fellow teammate, his fellow countryman in Kristaps Porzingis, and I'm sure he might see some time then. But yeah, he'll be used probably a little bit more sparingly as well. But Sean Marks has said himself, it's too early for me or anybody to decide that this is the role or this is the position that they have to play. Let's see how it pans out. But they do have a skill set, length, body size, IQ, all those intangibles. So it's a wait and see approach, but at the same time, sort of what is the sort of MO of guys like Atkinson and Marks? It's like, we're not putting expectations on you. You come in and prove to us, and we'll see what happens. We can work with and adapt on the fly. And I think both of these guys are going to have an impact, whether it's now or going into the future.
Yeah, I think you're pretty much spot on for this as well. Rodions Kurucs, I think, will spend most of the time in the G League. I think if there's an injury, he might be on the roster a little bit more and see some playing time. But he didn't play a ton of basketball internationally, and that was a problem with, I believe it was Barcelona, that he wasn't getting much playing time either. So they probably want to develop him, work on his game, see where he's at and where his skill set can best be used. And then Musa, it's really tough to say. I think that he'll have a very small role to start the year with a chance to expand it later in the season. I think there's going to be some adjusting to the NBA. I've said this before, international basketball to the NBA is definitely a difference. And I think the defense question is something that'll hurt him. And like you brought up, the depth. having Treveon Graham and other guys that wing possession now, it's going to be harder for him to get minutes, especially with the Nets kind of pushing the envelope, which we'll talk about a little bit later, about trying to make the playoffs and competing and being competitive. They're not just going to play the young guy because he needs development. They're going to do what's best for the team at the time. And I think Gianna could benefit just from being on the bench and talking to these guys and getting a feel for the league in his first year.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on top of that. I think with the veteran presence we have in the locker room now, I think that's going to have nothing but a positive impact on guys like Gianna and the Rodions. Jared Dudley, Kenneth Faried, Ed Davis, Damari Carroll. These guys are going to have a positive impact when it comes to influencing the habits of these rookies, and also the on-court and off-court sort of mentality for them. So I think that what you sort of covered there, Nick, is spot on as well.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, injuries always happen and somebody can end up playing a bigger role, but going to next season, I'm not expecting a ton from these guys. I'm not expecting a Karis LeVert or a Jared Allen type season, more so Jared Allen who had the big season.
Yes.
On to our next question, another OTG guy, Michael Sanchez. You can follow him at Latino as his Twitter handle. And his question is kind of a funny one. Over and under 1.5 dunks for Jared Dudley this year.
I've never seen Jared Dudley dunk. Have you ever seen Jared Dudley dunk, Nick?
I might have a highlight in the back of my head, but I looked it up for the last 3 years. He hasn't had a dunk.
Yeah, I was literally trying to look up dunking stats to try and be a bit more analytical with this one. But Michael, I'm sorry, mate. Literally, I doubt that he's going to get one at all. He's going to be hanging out on that perimeter more than anything. Maybe a couple of layups here and there. But I think that if you're comparing a sort of old guy who can dunk, Richard Jefferson is that type that he can still get up a little bit, maybe even a Channing Frye because he's got a bit more height about him. But working for Jared Dudley is the fact that he's apparently in really great shape, probably the best that he's been in a while, and he's being told that he's going to be a wanted player and will get some time, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be making any dunks. Who knows? We could get a pick and roll combination with D'Lo and Jared, and he just gets up there and surprises the heck out of us. But 1.5 seems very lofty. 0.5 I think is even probably a bit lofty for him. But he may surprise us, Michael. And we'll definitely be atting you and mentioning you on the show, and maybe even have to get you on for a guest spot if that's the case, if he gets a dunk in one of the games.
Yeah, if he gets a dunk, he has to come on the show. But I'm going with the under. I think the only way it happens if it's one of those perfect situations where he gets a steal and it's open court and no one's around, or he happens to fall on a play. He's getting up from the stands, the Nets get a steal and they throw it down to him, and literally no one's around. But I don't see it happening. I doubt he has a dunk this season if he hasn't had one in the last 3 years.
You're telling me, Nick, that Jared Dudley doesn't have the potential to do a Jared Allen posterizer?
I don't think so. I don't think Lauri Markkanen has to worry that much. On to our next question. This is from some of our YouTube guys, who we appreciate all the support on YouTube. You guys have been great with the likes, the comments. We like interacting with you guys and hearing your thoughts on the episodes. But this is from Marquis Johnson. Hey guys, quick question. Cat is not signed an extension in Minnesota. Do you think Cat and D'Lo are looking to team up next summer?
Yes, they are. Off the court. I think that's a bit clickbaity of me, well, audio clickbaity of me to say it that way. But the only way that they're going to team up is for off-court activities. They did in 2017, funnily enough, they were playing somewhat, amateur professional volleyball together. I don't think, I was watching the jump yesterday. Cat can get a possible $158 million max extension right now. But if he makes an All-NBA team following, his play this season, that can increase $31 million to $189.7 million. I think that it's a lot of money, and I don't think the Nets are going to be able to offer that. I think obviously the Jared Allen acquisition and the draft, sort of leaves him, null and void. And I think in a weird way, despite the fact that Jared Allen may never be, as good as a Karl-Anthony Towns, in a team setting like we mentioned earlier when we were talking about him, he's the perfect sort of piece to have. He may not get the sort of max contract that a guy like Cat or DeAndre Ayton or Joel Embiid can get, but he can be a guy like a Clint Capella that can get that sort of mid-range money and sort of be the perfect sort of second, third, fourth guy that's perfect when in a winning situation. I think the max extension is the main thing. They are really good friends, and I'll share a quote with them that I found in my research, and this is from Karl-Anthony Towns on Russell. I wish him the best anytime he needs to talk to somebody. I've always been that brother. I'm rooting for him on constantly being that number one fan. And Towns called Russell one of the best human beings on this planet. So much so that Towns said that he was a guy that would let him date his daughter. So there's a nice relationship there. But you could say the same thing about Devin Booker as well, who I've been posting some things from their Instagram. They're hanging out in Mykonos right now. I think, a lot of NBA guys have these relationships. Kyrie, Jimmy, KD. Those are sort of more likely guys to team up. In the future, there could be a possibility where after these sort of contracts and towards the end of their contracts, where they have those sort of player options, in 4 to 5 years' time, that's when there might be a more likely possibility to team up. But for me right now, it's only going to happen in the off season and off the court.
Yeah, I think both fact that they're restricted free agents. Towns, no way he leaves Minnesota. That would be crazy, and that would be terrible for the franchise. I think it'd be more likely if D'Angelo was traded to Minnesota. I don't think it's going to happen, but
Yeah.
I think that would be more plausible. And like you said, maybe down the line, when they're both unrestricted free agents, they want to team up. I would say it's more likely we saw a Devin Booker, D'Angelo Russell team up because those two seem like they're legitimately best friends. Like they're always hanging out, they're working out together, they just went on vacation together, but still both contract situations don't really match up. Maybe down the line we could see all three of them team up if they really wanted to.
Imagine that super team. Like
No defense, but a lot of O.
Well, if Cat finally becomes like a decent defender this year, like he showed it at college. That's the thing. Like
He's shown flashes.
He has shown flashes. It's just about consistency for him. And I think Devin showed, enough last year. D'Angelo, I think, this year, I think there's going to be a bit more of a responsibility for him on that end. And I think he will probably surprise us in spades, similar to what Alan Crabb did. But, that could be a super team in the future to watch for because, the NBA is ever evolving and things change so rapidly. The whole Jimmy Butler situation that's happening there. Obviously, what are they prioritizing the Minnesota front office? Tom Thibodeau is apparently, the head of that, but, I don't understand how you could sort of maintain those two responsibilities. But, in Brooklyn right now, I'm very happy to have Sean Marks as our front office liaison.
Yeah, and a great question from Marquis. Moving on to one of our other YouTube guys. I'm going to do my best to pronounce your name, Azhurdeen Bacchus. And the question is, do you all think that we will see more of D'Lo at the 2 this year since Kyrgios's court vision and probing play seemed really good last year, especially off the pick and roll with Jared Allen and also with Dinwiddie at the point and the acquisition of Shabazz?
Look, I think the points that Azhurdeen, if I'm saying it right, if I'm not, I'm very sorry and I apologize. The points that he makes are very valid about Kyrgios's court vision and the acquisitions we made. But I don't think that takes away from the fact that D'Lo is the sort of priority for the Nets going forward, as we've sort of discussed. I don't think it's going to change. According to Basketball Reference, D'Angelo Russell spent 99% of his time at the point guard last season. The most he's ever spent the time at the 2 was 14% in his rookie season in LA. I don't think that that's really going to change much. Just because D'Lo plays the point doesn't mean Kyrgios can't utilize the skills that Azhurdeen mentioned at the 2 as well. Like, look at the backcourt tandem that's happening in Houston right now. Two really great sort of floor generals that can probe and that can make passes. It doesn't mean that they can't play together. And they, whether it's nominally on the team sheet, one guy plays shooting guard, one guy plays point guard. It doesn't really make a whole heap of difference. It does, on Basketball Reference and all the sort of flashy stats websites. But in terms of like the positionless basketball going forward, that's all the rage and is sweeping the sort of league, and it's becoming the case with the Nets as well. I don't think, especially with our backcourt, it doesn't make a whole heap of difference. And Levert mentioned this recently to media when he was, I think, at a Brooklyn Nets event. We've still got a young core. We added some great pieces. We've got a lot of guys who can play a lot of position, can play together. That's a good problem to have. So like he mentioned, we can play together. And I think that's going to be the case for next season as well.
Yeah, I think I'm not, like you said, Jack, I'm not really buying as much as the 1 or 2. It's just guards. Like the Nets they're going to run a versatile offense in the way Kenny wants things to go. It's a lot of ball movement. Yeah, D'Angelo's probably getting more touches than the other guys, but there'll be times where he's technically the off-ball guard, and Karras is running a pick and roll with Jared Allen while he's out there. Same thing for Spencer Shabazz. There's so much talent at the guard position that they're going to see time together. But I mean, the priority is going to be D'Angelo running the show because that's, I think, what Kenny wants and what the Nets want. But at times, it's going to be the other guys, especially with all these guards, and it's only going to push them to be better. And like we mentioned before, Jack, there's always going to be injuries. Other guys are going to have to step up. So I think the most interesting thing is going to be who fits the best with D'Angelo. Is it going to be Kyrie? Is it going to be Dinwiddie? Or is it going to be Shabazz? Which I wouldn't be surprised because Shabazz, I think, has done the best playing off ball with other big time guards like CJ and Dame.
Yeah, he's like a near 39% from the perimeter shooting. He's a really, really nice off ball piece as well. I'll throw in a little tidbit as well. I think Kyrgios will play some time at the 3 as well.
Yes.
I think
He logged a lot of minutes at the 3. Technically, I think if you look up B-ball reference and you go there, they have a lot of minutes of him at small forward.
Yeah, and I think that that's not a bad thing. Those 3 guard, if you want to classify Caris LeVert, Tabari Carroll's mentioned on podcasts and to the media before that he thinks, Caris LeVert can play 1 to 4, going into the future. He has so much size about him. He has such a versatile skill set. We saw the 3 guard lineups in Portland with Shabazz Napier, and all of those guys are way undersized. We have size about us with D'Lo, with Spencer, with Caris. So I don't see any reason why we can't do that and make it better. Obviously, the talent of Spencer, of Dame and CJ is, far and beyond of what we have right now. But in terms of the skill sets, the fit, I think that there's a greater possibility, a greater chance that we see Caris LeVert playing alongside at the 3, possibly a bit more.
Yeah, and I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if Shabazz and D'Lo work good together, if Spencer and Caris work well together. I mean, they're going to have a lot of time in training camp, and I'm sure in the offseason they played a lot together as well to kind of get things going. So definitely, and that wraps it up for the mailbag. And like I said, appreciate you guys sending in the questions. We love it. We love hearing your thoughts and, what your concerns are about the Nets. And we'll try to do this again during maybe later in August or early September. But moving on to our next segment, Jack kind of referenced this a couple times already. Sean Marks had a conference call with some Nets fans and beats writers, and I think Ryan Rucco hosted it. Shout out to the 845. That's where I'm from. That's where he's from. But we'll break down some of these quotes, Jack, and we're going to get this via Nets Daily, who kind of transcribed some of these for us. So first one up, Mark says he's driven by knowing there will be nothing like winning in Brooklyn. There's going to be nothing like being able to turn this franchise around because the fans stuck with us.
I mean, Nick, we are the living embodiment of the fact that we've stuck with the Nets. I literally started following the Brooklyn Nets when they moved to Brooklyn. I wasn't really a heavy basketball follower at that stage. I was more of a casual fan. I loved sort of watching LeBron James and all the stars, Dwayne Wade, the Miami Heat, the Boston Celtics, all those sort of things. But, upon a trip to New York, I'm not sure many people know the story. I know you do. I mentioned it very, very early on in our friendship that I became a follower because, my brother's like, okay, he was deciding between the Clippers because he liked Blake Griffin and the Chicago Bulls because he loved Derrick Rose. He chose the Bulls. I was deciding between the Miami Heat because it was LeBron James and the Brooklyn Nets because I love New York and I love Jay-Z and I love black and white. And I ended up going with the Brooklyn Nets. For my sanity, it hasn't been the best decision, but I am completely all in on it because it's provided me with so many opportunities. And because of what Sean Marks has said, the reward of turning this thing around on his part, and he's obviously been such a huge part of that. Even just giving us, credibility in the free agency market, credibility in the NBA media sphere, which hasn't happened, credibility to us, the fact that we can now put out a podcast that is going to have listeners, and that has grown with you guys. It's just something that I'm really excited about, and for Sean Marks to put us on the map, so to speak, especially in probably one of my favorite city in the world and one of the greatest cities in the world. It's just awesome to think, and the fact that Sean Marks is committed to that vision just makes me feel even better.
Yeah, and the fact that Brooklyn is obviously New Jersey Nets have been around for a long time, but the fact that it's a Brooklyn Nets and they haven't been around that long, doing something special, being the first GM to have real success with them and turn things around in a really fast fashion too, because I've mentioned this before. I didn't expect it to happen like a snap of a finger, like Sean Marks has really made it happen. Next year they sign a couple big free agents. All of a sudden they're one of the better teams in the East. So he's really changed things fast. And like you said, just being able to see that. And I'm kind of just sick of hearing about all the Celtics jokes with the draft picks and seeing Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and the Dame Lillard stuff, like all that just really is getting old. So, and then just the fact that we talked about this, the perspective around the league is the Nets suck. They're not good. They're going to be bottom. Oh, they finally have their pick. They're definitely going to tank. Like, okay. So now people will actually kind of take note of us and treat us with more respect. And a lot of props goes to Sean Marks about that.
Definitely.
Another one from Marks. One reason we focused on culture from the beginning is because it was something we could control. We couldn't control draft picks. We couldn't control free agency. Yeah,
it's about controlling the controllables, Nick. One thing that's, as a franchise, I think, I'm not sure if this was Steve Kerr on a podcast, but in the fact that, in terms of being a new person in a franchise, you want to establish a culture and then sort of a winning culture. The Nets didn't have the talent there to create a winning culture. So you have to establish sort of winning habits. And I think in that sense, Sean Marks has done that with the acquisitions that he's made, with the coaching hires, with all the other stuff that he's hired, and obviously the players as well. And I think, establishing a culture starts with who you have around you. And I think having, the breadth of knowledge from all around the world. He's from New Zealand. Shout out to the Southern Hemisphere. But also with the players that he's acquired as well, guys that are buying into this: Ed Davis, Kenneth Faried, Jared Dudley, Damari Carroll, who's been here for a few years now. Guys are wanting to sort of, establish something here and be a part of something, whether it's for the short term or the long term, for their own benefits or for the team's benefit. I think that a lot of credit there goes to Sean Marks and also to the ownership for giving him that freedom that probably Billy King didn't have back in the day, as well as, the coaching staff as well. Rome wasn't built in a day, and, Barclays Center certainly wasn't either.
Yeah, and I think the fact that, the Nets caught a little bit of shade saying like they're focusing so much on culture, the other things don't matter at this time. And it actually looks like it could possibly pay off because some of the guys that we signed this year have mentioned what they've heard about the Nets and the family mentality and how that really impacts them signing with the team. Moving on to our next one, though, Jack. Marc said winning more this year is absolutely important for next year's free agency. You never want to have a losing culture. And if the Nets don't show a winning trajectory, it can be used against us by other teams in free agency.
It's something that we've harped on, and I think a lot of sort of non-Nets guys and more sort of general NBA followers and more general NBA media pundits will hear that and go, well, you've got your pick now, like you mentioned, Nick. What's the point of sort of trying to sort of sneak into the playoffs? But I don't think that the fact we've got those two picks, like I mentioned, those can be packaged together and moved up if we wanted to. I'm sure that there'll be some guys that might want that. It happened with Sacramento 2 years ago in that draft. So I think in that sense for us, the winning is the most important thing. I've talked about on the buzz before, the flattening of the lottery odds. If you finish 8th or 9th, it's not that much of a difference compared to finishing 10th or 11th. Obviously, those bottom 3 spots are the prime sort of position, so to speak. But I would much rather be knocking on the door of the playoffs, finishing 8th to 11th, and then sort of showing a lot of promising signs and, winning some good games, getting some great development of our young guys. All right, so this is what we did. Sean Marks can go to Kyrie, can go to Katie, can go to Kawhi. This is what we did. You come in, you make us a top 4 team. You make us automatically a top 3 team. And I think winning is the number one priority in that. And I think you'll hear a lot of sort of criticism from guys outside of Brooklyn Nets sort of media, whether that's from Nets Daily, whether that's from guys like at the Brooklyn Buzz and OTG Basketball. But I think that needs to be taken with a grain of salt because they're not the ones that know the franchise and what is important for them going forward. And I trust wholeheartedly with what Sean Marks is doing in his priorities.
Yeah.
Do you agree, Nick?
Yeah, spot on, Jack. We've been agreeing a lot on this, but we tend to do a lot, especially when it comes to the Nets. I think winning, and we've brought this up before, if they want to attract a free agent, they need to show not only they're going to win more games, but improvement. That the team is getting better. Guys are improving. The player development thing is real, and they're taking that next step. D'Angelo becoming an all-star, possibly Jared Allen becoming more consistent, a rebounding force. I think winning is just going to be like, all right, let's say even if they're on the cusp of the playoffs and they get like up to 38, 40 wins, they're making a big jump, a 10-game win jump, and then they say to, Kawhi or Kyrie, like, yo, we bring you in here. Now we have one more guy, and you're good for at least 10 wins. Now we're looking at a 50-win team, and now more player development from some of the young guys. Now we're taking another level up, and we're one of the top teams in the East, and there's a real chance of contending, not to mention there's plenty of upside with the guys that we still have. I think that's what you really are trying to sell is that, we're improving, and we have guys on our roster. Mainly the only guys locked up are going to be Karras and Jared Allen and the 2 rooks that we drafted this year. But Allen and LeVert, if they show a lot of jump this year, it's enough to sell the guys like, all right, we can take young players and we keep adding to this, especially if they keep the draft picks too. And I think, I know I'm ranting a little bit, but getting on like the draft pick idea, like, oh, the Nets really need a 10, get a top 3. Like, I don't think people will understand is that you can draft a top 5 player and he could be a bust and be terrible. Like We had Anthony Bennett, we had Jahlil Okafor on this team, both former high lottery picks, and they're out of the NBA.
Yep, absolutely. And I think it's unproven, the draft sort of, it's not unproven in terms of the draft system, but they're unproven commodities.
No guarantee.
There's no guarantee that, your number 1 pick is going to be, a franchise-changing superstar. Not everyone can be Ben Simmons. Not everyone can be LeBron James. There's going to be busts. And, it's much better to go down the route of free agency and get the proven sort of guy, the guy who has done it year in, year out, whether it's, with a winning franchise or whether it's just being an all-star, an all-NBA caliber player. And in that sense, I prefer that in that sense. But also being able to have that flexibility, which Marks has. If, we don't get enough wins and we happen to sort of, have a lot of injuries and, tanking seems to be by February, March, the better route, then that might be the case. We give more minutes to guys like John Musa, Rodion Kurucs, Karis LeVert, Jared Allen. I think that can certainly be the case as well. I think that it doesn't have to be tied down to it. And Sean Marks has mentioned, plenty of times about, in terms of the expectations for his players, but the adaptability I think that he has and the flexibility that he has with what we've got right now in terms of our players, our roster, as well as the assets with the picks and such, I think that we can go down any sort of route, and I think that we can have some success whichever one we decide to go down. But it's going to be fascinating to see the story unfold.
Yeah, I think one thing that looks great for Marks is he's already done a lot of great things with no assets. Now he's going to get some assets. He's going to get some cap space with a more attractive team, and he's going to have some draft picks. So we don't really know what's going to happen. That's kind of leads to his next quote. Mark said, "You never know what turns we might take this year," suggesting the Nets could be active during the season after December 15th at the deadline or on draft night. And like I mentioned, all these quotes are via Nets Daily, so check them out on Twitter. Obviously, the best Nets website out.
Yeah, and I think that like I mentioned before with the flexibility in there, Kawhi Leonard, if he's unhappy in Toronto, if Kyrie Irving, if there are rumblings about him in Boston sort of showing some discontent, if somehow that sort of growing, budding roster, that they all have some chemistry issues, there certainly could be an issue. If Kyrie's texting Jimmy and Jimmy's unhappy in Minnesota as well, there's certainly, that wiggle room to make a trade. But at the same time, what I like about what the Lakers did, in a sense, they get a lot of criticism. But if you're getting in a new player, if you're trading for a new player, they're not going to want you to trade away all of your assets, all of your best players, because they're going to want to go to a team that is growing and has the best amount of talent available to it. So that's why free agency is probably the more sound route, because it allows us to keep our assets, be they draft picks, be they players. But at the same time, if the package is right and there's a commitment from those guys that we've mentioned, then I don't see Sean Marks not pulling the trigger either.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of already built some confidence in trades with him, knowing that he's probably not going to get, killed in a trade or ripped off or anything like that. He's probably going to come out on the winning side. So we trust his potential in helping the Nets kind of take that next step. And, he might need to take a little bit of a risk because just there hasn't really been a huge free agent signing in Brooklyn, kind of brings some more attraction to the team. And it kind of makes it kind of even more exciting when you hear rumors or stuff, because there's a real possibility that the Nets could make a move for this guy, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah, exactly. So then another one was what Mark sees as the biggest improvement this year: ability to close out games. Team is now accustomed to each other's skills.
Yeah, I think that closing out games as well. The 2-minute report might help us as well.
Yeah, that too.
If we get some refs on our side, but Mark's is obviously not going to mention that. He's a much more measured, less sort of hot takey guy like myself. But yeah, I think that the chemistry that we showed last year that he mentioned was far and beyond than what we thought. We could have easily had 35 wins. Had the whistle gone our way, had the ball sort of rimmed in on a couple of different shots. Had we had a bit of luck on our side, and I'm a firm believer for you create your own luck, and in that sense, that comes with culture and the moves that we've made. And I think having ready-made guys, and I think in terms of what he meant for he talked about with chemistry there. I mentioned before we have such a large Brooklyn contingent in Davis, Napier, and Crabbe. There's already an embedded chemistry there. Kenneth Faried as well. I'm sure that he's got some connection. He's got his connections to New Jersey. And, Jared Dudley seems like the perfect sort of mentor that can sort of just slot into the locker room, teach young guys, and provide a bit out on the court. So I think chemistry is one thing that the Nets have prided themselves on. And I think in terms of locker rooms, if we're rating them, they're certainly easily in the top 5 in terms of for non-combustibility and in terms of cohesion.
Yeah, I think it's just going to help in so many different elements. And like we saw last year, closing out games was a huge problem for the Nets. Now, this is another one. We're going to try to run through a couple more. This is Sean Marks on the training facility. The gym is open 24 hours for them. Marks noted adding many of the players show up late after the city life is over for them. Mark singled out Jared Allen and Karis LeVert, who are players who are in the gym most, adding that Ed Davis has been in since signing and DeMar Carroll's been since the season was over.
Does not surprise me, my friend.
Especially if you follow him on Instagram.
Exactly. Have you seen that place? Like, if I had access to a gym like that on a basis, I'd be working nonstop as well. So I think that those are all good things to hear. We always talk about the whole gym thing, gym rat sort of thing. Everyone's getting in the gym. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to win an extra 10, 15 games, but it's about creating working, winning sort of habits, and it all starts in the gym. It all starts behind the scenes, and those are good things. But yeah, man, if I had keys to that gym, I'd be living there.
Yeah, no, it's definitely. I'd be like, "Yo, could I get a room here
Oh,
where I
no,
could
yeah,
sleep?"
true.
Yeah, but Mark's also mentioned that D'Angelo has been working extremely hard on his health and his body this offseason, which is a wonderful thing to hear. And another guy, if you follow him on Instagram, you could see.
He is. I think one of our earlier pods in season one, in terms of like I mentioned before, that D'Lo is a very handsome man. Very handsome man. I'm a big fan of his tattoos, and 2K are better beyond that in terms of fixing that in 2K19, which I believe that they are. He's a very handsome man. He's looking a lot more cut, a lot more ripped. And I think that's going to work well for him because, in terms of his body, obviously there are freak injuries that happen, and a lot of them, happen to a lot of our players. But if you put your base behind you in the off season, you give yourself every chance to sort of play 82 games. And I think that should be one goal for D'Angelo as well, despite the 50, 40, 90 goal for him. I think being out on the court as much as possible gives him every chance to having a great season, and the team having a great season as well.
Yeah, and I think it goes into just kind of creating a healthier lifestyle, just taking care of your body on all assets, understanding now you're an adult and you're a professional athlete. There's different things that you can't do and other people can do, and you just have to accept it. And we understand, prioritize your health as the number one thing. And I think we've seen that a lot from D'Angelo this offseason.
And I mean, Karras is still hitting up Chipotle, I'm assuming. Where do you think D'Lo goes for that sort of like healthy but
I
not?
saw
Do
him
you
eating,
reckon
I want to say a Caesar salad one time and in one of his
that's all right?
videos.
I reckon
So
the Nets chefs would have awesome sort of stuff there. I reckon he might be a bit of a Subway guy.
yeah,
Um,
maybe. I want to say I'm not like honestly, this is a random fact about me. I'm not a big fan of salads. I don't know. I'm just all about like sandwiches, meat, and like
yeah,
actual meals and stuff. And but I think it's called like Chopped, which is pretty big in New York, where you just
yeah,
go there and get a chopped salad, and they have a lot of different combinations. That'd be like the one time where I'll actually hit up a salad.
yep. I mean, Shake Shack's right across the road. Hopefully, he's not hitting that up too many times.
Yeah, and not too much. Maybe if you drop a 40-point triple double, we reward you with some Shake Shack. But
True that. True that.
Um, another one from Sean. Agents want their guys around our coaching staff, around our performance team. They see the bodies changing and abilities realized. This is a really confident statement. Sorry to cut you off, Jack, but this was one I didn't necessarily expect, but it kind of, says a lot about what Mark thinks and what maybe the rumblings are around the NBA, because I don't think he'd say this without some basis for it.
Yeah, it has to come. It has to come with some credence. We don't normally hear a lot of sort of like words from the agents themselves, but coming via short marks, it has some credibility to it. And we're famed for our coaching stuff. We're famed for our environment, and I think that that's a positive thing, especially for the younger sort of free agents like Kyrie, like Jimmy. They're not in the mid to late 30s. KD sort of 30, 31. But I think that only is a positive thing. It's just another selling point for prospective free agents, whether they be top level, mid level, or even guys that you just want to pick up like Treveon Graham that you can sort of like lock down and sort of it's a selling point. And I think any extra selling point that we have, and whether it be our culture, our environment, our coaching staff, or the people around us, is nothing but a good thing.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. It's really nice to hear, and it kind of makes you believe that people are really buying to the Nets and what they're doing, and all these small things are kind of adding up to one big thing along with the culture. It's kind of setting the tone and changing the perspective of the franchise, starting the NBA, and then the media will kind of react afterwards.
Yeah.
This will be the last one from Mark's, unless you got another one that I didn't hit on that you want to touch on. Asked about the playoffs, Mark's notes his players in interviews are predicting playoffs and adds, I don't see a reason why we can't make a push. Isn't that the objective here? We're not sitting here saying we plan to win 20 games, so we see where it will go.
Like what's exactly what he said? Like if you're not in the game of basketball, if you're not playing sport to win it, what is the point? I don't understand losing mentality. Like we saw sort of what happened in Philly. There was rumblings about their culture in a sense until obviously they got the ridiculous amount of assets with Sam Hinkie and they were all top assets. But with what we're doing right now, I think we're doing sort of like an Indiana sort of style, a Milwaukee sort of style rebuild. You don't have to bottom out to sort of get back to the top. The Golden State Warriors didn't have a top 3 pick, but yet they're this budding behemoth in the Western Conference, and all their guys they drafted as well. It's I think that teams can be built and franchises can be built in different ways, and aiming to win should always be the goal.
Yeah, and I think with a coach like Kenny being so competitive and some of these young guys being so hungry and some of the vets wanting to get back in the playoff scene and show themselves, I think this is the perfect response. And it kind in times he's kind of calmed down some of the playoff expectations and the playoff predictions and whatnot. But this seems like he feels a little bit more confident with this squad that they're going to win more games. Obviously, the comment about people wanting to come here and then also mentioning he thinks that they're going to close out games better this year. I think it says a lot. And I think the Nets are probably going to be more so looking to win games instead of developing players, which has been the case maybe the last 2 seasons, where this year they might actually put that to the side, maybe a touch, just to make sure they're coming out on top and maybe closing out some of these games.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and that wraps it up for that. Sean Marks obviously always has some great quotes for us. I feel like that's like the 4th or 5th time this summer we've broken down some of his press conference and conference calls. Kenneth Faried and Treveon Graham also had some things to say. We'll kind of just summarize it for them. Faried just kind of talked about how he wanted to get back to being the player he was. The manimal's not gone. He's looking to playing in Brooklyn. He's going to make guys work, and he knows coming in here there's no spot for him. He's going to have to earn it. So I think on the Faried front, that's really enticing to hear that he knows that he needs to earn his position. He's not just going to be like, all right, here's some minutes, go play.
Yeah, and if we see him recapture some of the form that he had in his mid days in Denver, him and Jokic were a wonderful tandem, and I think that he can provide like a lot of our sort of guys a unique skill set. Whether it's as an energy guy off the bench, and if he plays good minutes, he will be rewarded. And and I think he's going to crack the rotation. He provides us with the that rebounding. Like I love guys because they can get offensive rebounds because. Despite the fact that I'm only 6'3", versing street balls, I'm kind of tall here in Australia. So it's one thing that I love, guys who can rebound. And for me, it's something really fun. He's a great dunker. And I think that if he can, we saw a couple of 3-pointers, in some pickup games as well from him as well. If he can, and it looks smooth. We've seen Joakim Noah shooting and Tristan Thompson shooting it, and it's like an uglier form than Draymond Green. Kenneth Faried looked kind of smooth with it. So I think that he's going to be doing everything he can to sort of, getting Coach Kenny's ear and get those minutes.
Yeah, and I think anytime you play close to home, like being from New Jersey, it just adds like that extra hype and that energy, and then your family at the game, especially an energy-driven player like Kenneth Faried. I don't know what his minutes or rotations are going to be like. So I will obviously have a better idea after preseason and training camp, but there is definitely potential there, especially just even if he comes in for a couple minutes here and there every quarter or whatnot, just kind of energizing everybody, it could be a big boost to the team.
I think the funnest thing about training camp coming up, Nick, and there's a lot of sort of buzz coming from the Nets, obviously, is that so many of our guys are fit and firing. And there's always been one guy or 2 guys that have had niggling injuries. But if we go into the season as a fully fit roster, then that gives us every chance to have a really successful year. And, for the guys individually and also as a team.
And even if we do have an injury, unlike years in the past, we actually have guys that can fill in and that they have experience in that role. Even last year when Jeremy went down, we have Spencer Jones, we have D'Angelo Russell, but they didn't, and D'Angelo went down later on. Spencer wasn't ready for that role right away. He had some nice moments, but later in the season, it kind of caught up to him. Now he's experienced taking on a bigger role. Now in the forward area, in the center area, we have actual depth, where last year we had guys that we literally had on the roster that we couldn't play. Like Timothy Mozgov was not playable. He was hurting the team. Zeller had good moments with the team as well, but he's not an all-star center by any means. So, it's nice to just have players at different positions where you can kind of plug and play. Guys having an off night, give them the night off, put somebody else in. The matchup doesn't really work out. All right, now we have some different guys we can kind of throw back at them.
Absolutely.
Treveon Graham, he also met with the press this week as well. We'll just summarize it real quick. He said it's not a coincidence he signed with Brooklyn. They give people a lot of opportunities. He mentioned how he can play, up to the 4 position. He did a little bit with Charlotte last year. He also likes the fact that he's going to be close to his family, and he also noted how the Nets shoot a lot of threes. So what were your thoughts on what Graham had to say?
I mean, the threes thing is the one that I like, Nick. As much as I love my rebounding, I know you love your spacing, and I think Treveon can give us some of that. He'd be, I think he shot like over 41% or over 40% last year from 3 on limited attempts, but I think that that's going to increase this year. And if he's given the opportunity and, with the amount of talent and depth that we now have, I think that's going to work wonders for him. And, he automatically becomes one of our better defenders. A 3-and-D wing who can play from, 2 to 4 is going to be very valuable. And I think that I'm really excited to see his development. And I'm sure some of the guys, the former Charlotte guys at OG basketball will be as well.
Yeah, I love like you said, Jack. I love spacing, so I love 3-point shooting. I also love me some toughness. I love some gritty guys that are willing to kind of bang, especially undersized guys willing to play the four a little bit too. I think I love small ball. Like I just love the spacing, the speed, and what it brings to the team. And if you have tough guys where you can play that, like the Rockets did last year with PJ Tucker, I don't think Treveon Graham is going to be that, but I think it's really exciting to add another piece like that, and he just kind of adds the depth to the team.
Yeah, and he's so young as well. Like,
Yeah.
and the fact that we've got him on the cheap, I was surprised that, a team like Houston didn't offer him a little bit more because I think that
Mm.
he would have fitted in perfectly in their system. But I think it sort of says of what Trevion wants to do, and it maybe his sort of agent and his sort of team were like, look, I don't see myself having as large a role there, and maybe I want to be closer to home, like you said, and I want to be part of something big here in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I think the fact that there's going to be an opportunity in Brooklyn that he mentioned not getting any favoritism where, so maybe something happened in Charlotte where somebody's making more money than him and he didn't get to play even though he thought he was playing better. He thinks that the Nets will give him a fair shot to play if he's
Yeah,
playing at a higher level, which I think is true. And I think at certain spots in the league, you wouldn't get that because I was also surprised that it would have made a lot of sense for the Rockets to go after him, especially at 3-and-D wing, give them some more depth after losing Ariza and Abba Mute. Because like even adding Carmelo and James Ennis, they could still use some help in that area. But that's
yeah,
for the NBA and JBT, not for Brooklyn Buzz.
true that.
That wraps up though for the quotes and the press and all that. We do have some more rumors though. It just seems like these Nets rumors keep on coming. And Marc Stein mentioned this week in his on New York Times. This is a little portion. I'll read it. Kyrie Irving's intentions are not all clear at this point. There have been no firm indication from Irving or his camp that the All-Star is eyeing an exit from Boston next summer or that he's angling to go to New York, as it is often speculated.
Yeah, I think that obviously with Kyrie, and in the newsletter as well, I think that I'm a subscriber to, and you all should be. Mark Stein is one of the best writers going around out there. I think that Kyrie, things are going to change. These rumors are going to be, changing by the day, by the month. But I think that, New York, whether it's the Knicks, whether it's the Nets, they're going to be brought up pretty constantly. And obviously, we're going to keep on top of that and, at the buzz. But I think that the fact that he is uncertain in ways and like he doesn't know what he wants yet, the season hasn't even started. So these rumors, you take
Our rumors, yeah.
yeah, they're rumors. But like I said before, I guess there's not as much smoke here. It's probably more the smoke of a candle rather than the smoke from a genuine blaze. But there is a little bit of smoke there.
Yeah, and to finish off, he also had, but there are nonetheless credible rumblings in circulation that the Nets plan to pursue Irving right alongside the Knicks should he become a free agent on July 1st, 2019. In short, I expect Brooklyn to aim as high as possible in free agency while reserving the right to stay conservative. The Nets can't convince a top-tier free agent to take their money. So he's mentioning, which I haven't heard anything like this. I haven't even seen anything like this, that there is credible rumblings, and Marc Stein is not the type of guy to post nonsense. He's not a
Nope.
clickbaiter. He's only going to post, like, you rarely see him post rumors and stuff like this unless he knows it's true. So I was really intrigued when I saw the fact that there is credible rumblings that the Nets could pursue Kyrie.
Yeah, and funnily enough, the guy that you're going to mention next as well is in the same boat as Mark Stein. Very credible writers, and the rumors that they post are generally, very well informed.
Yeah, they just won't post it to post it. Like, there'll be plenty of guys out there that may have heard it where it might even just be an opinion and they might post it out there. These guys are always the trusted guys. So
Yep.
the fact that the Nets are even eyeing Kyrie is very interesting. And I didn't know if I expected it because of the D'Angelo thing, but who knows what they're planning, if they think they can play together or that's farther down the line. Like you said, we're not even in 2019. We're already talking about that offseason.
Yeah.
Moving on to David Aldridge, the guy that you kind of hinted at, he talked about the Nets and Kawhi. Mark's, and this was a fan asking about if he thought Sean Marks in the San Antonio connection could hurt or help the Nets in kind of getting Kawhi. Marks is his own man, and his staff has its own tale to tell Leonard and his representatives. The Philadelphia 76ers, for example, had a good shot in Leonard because of the part that Leonard's relationship with Sixers coach Brett Brown, a relationship that was formed while Brown was an assistant in San Antonio. Unless Marks rubbed Leonard the wrong way somehow in 2010, in the 210 area code, there's absolutely no evidence I know of indicating that. I think Leonard will give the Nets a fair hearing. So pretty much to summarize that, he thinks that the Nets will get a meeting with Kawhi Leonard next year.
Yeah, and I mean, you've got to be in with a chance. If you've got a chance, then who knows what could happen? Kawhi Leonard is one of the most closed books going around right now. His intentions are so unknown that you're throwing stones at anywhere. Like it's just like throwing stones randomly. You don't know what's going to happen. I couldn't think of the appropriate analogy there. But yeah, for Kawhi, I think I'd prefer Kawhi than Kyrie, personally. I think that having a really high upside wing. It depends on what he shows this season. Everyone's sort of already talking about the LA thing as well. He hasn't even come back and proved that he's healthy yet. So I think that we need to temper expectations with a lot of these rumors, but with Kawhi as well, because yes, he had a nice meeting with Nick Nurse, and yes, he's apparently starting to say all the right things, and he is an MVP contender when healthy, but he needs to get back and prove that. But we'll have to wait and see. His season in Toronto could be an unmitigated disaster, or it could be a revelation, and it could further the rumblings of his wanting to come to Brooklyn.
Yeah, I think the thing with Kawhi, it's so unknown. Is he going to stay in Toronto? Is he a lock to go to the Lakers? Is he go somewhere else? Like you said, I mean, I think Kawhi would probably be maybe at the top of my list. KD would be up there, but I don't know. Like Kawhi is just really intriguing, depending on what happens this season. And obviously, there's probably a little bit longer of a prime because KD's kind of getting up there. I think you add Kawhi, and he's such a great fit with his team for what he adds defensively. Not to get me wrong, that I wouldn't want KD, or Kyrie or Jimmy Butler, but I think there's definitely some real intrigue with Kawhi Leonard. And then also mentioned on Nets Daily, and I want to say the Daily News, Sean Marks has a great relationship with Kawhi's uncle, which is obviously a big deal. And then also the Nets have some former Spurs staffer on their team, including Splitter.
Yeah, and I think Kawhi is only 27. Obviously for the Nets, we would rather have the guy with age on his side, sort of going forward, because we've made those moves before where the older guys
didn't work out, huh?
Didn't necessarily work out. But we will not mention those ever again on the Book and Buzz, or we might have to. But yeah, I think that all these rumors it's odd to see the fact that the Nets are one of the number one teams. Normally, it's like the Lakers, it's the Knicks, it's all these sort of teams. But the Nets have built, like we've been talking about for the past sort of hour or so on the pod. We've built our credibility up to the fact that we're in the running with all these guys.
Yeah, I want to say I don't have the exact tweet in front of me, but Las Vegas put out odds for where Kyrie will play next year. Actually, I just found it. The Boston Celtics are at plus 105, New York Knicks at plus 250, and the Nets are at plus 305, the third closest one. So that's really intriguing. That's something that I wouldn't have predicted years ago.
And funnily enough, one of I can't remember which betting agency it was, there's just so many of them, had one of the first to report the fact that Kawhi, the Raptors were the leading contenders to land Kawhi. That eventuated in the sense of what we saw. So if it's anything to go by, to be the third most likely team in the running and just behind the Knicks for Kyrie Irving, who were basically, the number one team, even after he was sort of leaving Cleveland a season ago. The Nets weren't even in the conversation, but they've put themselves firmly in the front one of the seats to sort of land his services.
Yeah, it's honestly crazy to go from getting rumors about getting bad players to getting really good players, some of the best in the league. Sean Marks, like we've talked about, and we've kind of like worshipped him on this show. He's done an amazing job. But anything else you want to touch on, Jack, before we get out of here?
No, mate. We've probably next week we'll do some fun topics, and I'll go back to my social media sleuthing.
Yeah, some sleuthing. But that wraps it up for today. As always, check us out on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, and Dash Radio, and YouTube as well. As always, like I said, retweet, share, hit us up on Twitter at OTGNick and JManJBT. Let us know what you think. Debate with us. We want to hear your thoughts on the Nets.